Pokemon Sun and Moon are just right around the corner, and for a while the world had gone through the Pokemon craze with the phenomenon that was Pokemon Go. In August of 2016, Nintendo reported that their sales of 2DS and 3DS systems had gone up by 500%, something they largely believe is the result of interest generated by Pokemon Go. In February of 2016, we saw the re-release of the original Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue, and the later Yellow version on the 3DS eShop. For only a few dollars, you can replay the games that started this whole thing in the first place. Not only that, but for the first time ever, it will be possible to transfer your Pokemon from these Generation 1 games to the latest Sun and Moon versions. So there's a lot of reasons for people to try out the original games. There's also another very compelling reason to give the Generation 1 games a go, apart from getting a leg up on the latest titles. They are, in fact, really, really good. The first generation of Pokemon put me on the road to becoming the gamer that stands in front of you today, as it was one of the first games I ever played as a kid. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that these games were masterpieces, and in this video I'm going to share a little bit as to why. First off, I have to say what it is I mean when I use the word masterpiece. When most people hear the term, they think of something that is perfect, or outstanding, or otherwise beyond what mere mortals could wish to accomplish. Sure, some of that may apply to the first generation of Pokemon, but that's not the argument I'm making. I'm using the word masterpiece in the original sense, when it was a piece of work that proved to everyone that you'd mastered your art. It was supposed to show that you understood the rudimentaries of that art and could apply them. That's the kind of masterpiece I think Generation 1 Pokemon is. And anyone who has an interest in designing a game can learn a lot from playing these first Pokemon games while paying attention. Obviously, these games aren't perfect, and I don't have the time to cover every single last detail in just a few minutes, but here are the aspects of Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow that I think make them a masterpiece. Modern game developers can learn a lot from the way that Pokemon communicates goals and challenges to the player. One of the most important things you have to do in a game is to provide players with something to work towards or achieve. They not only need to have a goal in sight, but they need to have motivation to achieve it. Pokemon does this masterfully. The second you're dropped into the game, you are given a number of goals or challenges. Within the first few moments of the game, you know a couple of things already. 1. The ultimate goal is to become the league champion, which means to be the best trainer. 2. You are also tasked with completing the Pokédex, which means finding every single Pokemon in the game. And finally, 3, you have to beat your rival, who's in a race with you for the exact same goals. Right from the start, you know what you're getting into. You know if you want it or not, and you are on the journey to get there. These goals tap into a number of psychological urges, such as the need to complete sets, to receive recognition, and to compete. All very natural things that people like to do, and Pokemon pushes those buttons right from the very beginning. As much as Pokemon tells you just enough to get you interested, invested, and motivated as soon as possible, it's also important to note what the game does not tell you. In many other role-playing games, you are told exactly what everything does and how every mechanic works. Many developers seem deathly afraid that if a player doesn't have a complete understanding of how everything they design works, they won't enjoy the game. Pokemon basically gives you a few choices when it comes to learning what anything does. 1. Try and see what happens. 2. Find the info by talking to other characters. And 3. Find the info in in-game resources like books or signs. Exploring and experimentation are another 2 activities that we human beings enjoy. The developers could have simply provided all the information at the tips of your fingers, but instead it becomes a core mechanic of the game. Gaining knowledge is key to reaching your goals, and is one of the invisible obstacles that are placed between you and your ultimate victory. There's also a 4th source of information that you might have not even considered, which is other players. Pokemon was designed to encourage social gaming, even if it is mostly a single-player experience. Chances are that 2 different players could learn different things on each playthrough, which means sharing that information with your friends who are also playing is not only a good idea, but it's something that the developers want you to do. Remember that these games came out in an era where there was no internet for the average kid to refer to. Strategy guides were expensive things printed on paper and may only have come out long after a game's release. Other players may have been your only source of information external to the game. That genius move also extends to the fact that you cannot complete the core challenge of completing the Pokédex without the help of others. The games are designed to not have all the Pokemon available for capture, so even if you want to finish the first challenge, which is completing the Pokédex, you must go out and find other players. This is why I strongly recommend that if you play this game today, you should resist the urge to run to the internet browser every time you get stuck. Playing the game with perfect foreknowledge damages the experience a lot, and you may not really experience the magic if you play it that way. Playing it without interacting with other players may also be as bad, although you can still get the full single-player experience. So let's talk about structural design of the game for a second. What is Pokemon really about? Battling Pokemon, right? Well, yes, that's true, but it's also a big puzzle box that you're given to solve. Another way that the game lets you know what's expected of you is in the form of the Pokemon League building. Right from the start of the game, you can walk to the building where the end bosses reside and be told where you need to go next. Which badge do you need to progress one layer deeper into the building? There are many repeating patterns in Pokemon. Almost every city has a gym. Each gym leader has a badge and so on. The challenges are nested, however. Puzzles are put inside other puzzles, which quickly turns the actual process of achieving the next goal into a small adventure within itself. I can't really think of many, if any, other games that have challenges packed so densely into each other. The big challenge of beating the Elite Four is broken up into 8 badge challenges. These are broken up into beating the gyms, but you generally have to solve the main puzzle in the city before even getting into the door of the gym. Before you can even do that, you need to get past roadblocks on the route to that city, etc, etc. It's a good design for a handheld game, because even if you have only 5 minutes to kill, there's always a challenge in the game that fits into that time slot. The Pokemon themselves are obviously an important part of the whole thing as well. Basically, Pokemon are the solution to all the conflicts or problems in their world. It's very clever to give the player one versatile tool which they can use to address every challenge in the game with a little creativity. It's the same sort of thing that games like Portal have done, except instead of thinking with portals, you're thinking with Pokemon. Each Pokemon has unique species attributes, and even among Pokemon of the same species at the same level, you'll find very different mixes of moves and strategies. The decision to limit the moves a Pokemon can learn is another example of genius game design. By limiting the amount of choices a player has, you force them to think strategically and creatively, both things that are immensely satisfying and add to the fun. Training up a complementary team of 6 Pokemon adds a whole new level of strategy to the game, and if you've never played a Pokemon at all, you may find the level of strategic depth on offer surprising for what's supposed to be a kid's game. The other amazing thing they did in this game was how even the annoying things were ultimately part of the game's challenge. Like many JRPGs, Pokemon has a lot of random encounters and grinding. There's no run button, there's no fast travel, and a bunch of other issues that can really become a chore for the player by default. Almost every one of these gripes can be addressed with an item or a move that you can find and teach to your Pokemon. Strategic use of items that modify encounter rates or let you travel in more efficient ways transforms the way the game is played. Finding those items and learning how to use them is another challenge that makes up part of the game design again. Trying to reverse engineer the works of a master is a great way to progress on the road to mastery yourself, but I often wonder how much of this apparent genius game design I see in games like Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow are actually the results of happy little accidents, as Bob Ross would say. There are many innovative game mechanics that just started off as accidents. The skiing trick in the Tribes games are a famous example, and the combos in Street Fighters are another. I guess the genius can also be expressed in the ability to recognize which accidents to keep and copy and which ones to throw away. Later Pokemon games proved to me that these guys generally knew the parts of the Pokemon formula that are important ones and made sure to transplant them into later games. Those games are, however, refinements of the original formula. The game that coined that formula is the masterpiece, and that is the distinction that the first generation of Pokemon can never lose. So what are your takes on the original titles? Agree? Disagree? Did I miss something obvious or leave something out that you think should have been mentioned? Let me know in the comments below. And before you ask, no, I don't like Mudkips. It's a vicious rumor that I wish people would stop spreading. I just like water types, man.